mode. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Just to show hands, how many danced the night away? Was there anybody on the floor? That was a lot of fun, wasn't it? I always enjoy silent disco. It's hard to get up the next morning for an 8:30 presentation, though, so I appreciate you guys being here this morning. The bit.ly for the slideshow is up here on the screen. So if you wanted to follow along and with me, you can follow along there. It is also on my resource page that's in Sketch. So if you get home and you were like, I forgot to write that down, it'll be there in the Sketch and you can still pull it up. My name is Denise Orndorff. I am an ITC for Frederick County Public Schools. So it's my second year with Frederick County. I was with Shenandoah County for 23 years prior to that. So if you've seen my name in another county, yes, I made a little transition jump there in the middle of the pandemic. Change has been good. And this morning we're gonna focus on Jamboard. I'm gonna go through the basics of Jamboard so that we're all on the same level and understand Jamboard. And then I'm gonna give you a lot of templates that you can either go back and change for your liking or get your wheels turning to what you can create and use with your students. So with that. So with Jamboard and with everything Google, there's more than one way to get to a Jamboard. I usually have my students go to the waffle and go down to Jamboard, or you can go to your Google Drive, go to New, and you have to go to More and go over here. They hide it over here with Google Drawings. So this is what your Jamboard would look like when you open it up. Up in the top left-hand corner, right now it is titled Untitled. The first thing I always tell my students, whether it's a doc, a slide, a Jamboard, the first thing you always need to do is name it. Because if you don't, you're gonna have 150 items or more in your Google Drive and you're not going to know what you're looking for. If you try to search by a keyword, you may not find it. So best practice is name first. So then here to the left, you'll see all kinds of tools, okay? So the first tool over here is a pen. And when you click the pen, you have the pen, the pencil, a highlighter, and a paintbrush. And you have 6 colors you can change it to. I will have to say this is the one thing I'm hoping that Google will take feedback for and give us more colors. Because for any of us that are creative or we need more colors, we only get 6 and it sort of squashes our creativity. But on the plus side, if you're working with students, 6 choices works really well for them because then they're not sitting there playing with every single color. You have your eraser, you have the select tool, which you'll use to drag things around. You can also bring in images. So when I click my image here, I have the option of uploading an image from my computer. So I can go in here, I can grab an image and place it in my board. Click that select arrow and I can move it and I can change the size of it. Also know that they can do a search. They can pull from their drive. If any of you are hooked to Google Photos, you can pull out your Google Photos. But you also have the camera option here. So if I click on my camera, so down, they can see me. So if you have a student doing work and you want them to hold it up and show it, they can hold it in front of the camera and take a picture and put it in the Jamboard. The one above, I'm sorry, I skipped the one above the photo. This is the sticky notes, and this is probably one that most of the teachers that I work with use the most. Basically, it's just putting Post-it notes on here. So you can see you've got 5 colors for the sticky notes that you can choose from, or you can also take the color away and there wouldn't be a color behind it. So if I just choose pink, and then I come down here and I type good morning. And I click cancel here. Here's my sticky note. I can make it large or I can make it small. One thing to think about with your sticky notes is if you're going to assign each student a page, you could put their sticky note in the corner with their name or their number, and then they know exactly which page they're going to go to. Shapes, they also limit the shapes. There's only 8 shapes, so I'm hoping that they add some more shapes for us. You have a text box. So if I go over here and I'm typing, you'll notice up here is where my choices are. The font you cannot change. This is a standard font in Jamboard. If I click here, I can change the size of it. I can change the color, but notice we only get those 6 little colors there. And I can make it so that it's centered or left or right aligned. So that's with the text. Down here at the bottom, this is the one the kids absolutely love when they are presenting their Jamboards, and it's a little laser pointer. So if I circle something, it's there for a few minutes and then it sort of disappears. So if they're trying to catch or show something on their research or on their Jamboard, they can circle it and then it disappears. So those are the tools to the left. Up at the top here, you see set background. When Jamboard first started, the only backgrounds we had was the white one, this grid, the line one, the square grid, the gray, and these 2 colors, and that was it. And there was no other options. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Google, but they do listen to feedback, and a lot of us kept hitting that feedback button that we wanted to do our own backgrounds. So now I can go in here and I can choose my image. I'll just go choose my Discovery Edwin again. And now it is my background. You can create your own backgrounds in Google Drawing and save them as an image. And in the PowerPoint, I'll show you here in a minute, it's 16:9 in the pixels so that you don't get that distorted look when you make an image to put on your background. And I'll show you some benefits of locking in that background when you do some sorts or some math activities. Over here to the right, you have 3 dots. Of course, you can rename it. The second option there is download as a PDF. So I have some secondary teachers when they're using Jamboard, they actually build their lessons in Jamboard and they're taking notes with the student. But let's say Tommy is out and he needs a copy of the notes. You can download it as a PDF and take that PDF file and put it in Google Classroom, and then the students would have access to those notes. The other thing that it was good for, we worked with some second graders, and they had to do some research on their famous Americans. So when we downloaded it as a PDF, they could then take it and start working on research with each child, finding the topics or the facts for each of the famous Americans. So sometimes you may need that downloading option. If you create a Jamboard that you really, really like on that frame, you can actually save that as an image and put it in a Google Doc or put it in a Google Slide if it's something that you want to reuse. Like everything in Google, you can make a copy, which today in the templates that I've given you, it will force a copy for you. But if you ever find one that you like online, most of the time if you make a copy, it's yours, then you can manipulate and edit and change it as you like. And then down at the bottom is see revision history. This was another thing that we told Google that we needed so that we could see when changes were made. That was not there originally. So you could see here, I just started this one this morning. So you can see it's blank because I just started it. And if this is the one that I wanted, I could just click restore this version. You do have the share button over here. So you can share and collaborate with it. You can just have the link, and I'm going to show you a neat little trick here in a second when you get into Jamboard that you can do with the restrictions here with the links as an editor and a viewer. So what I would like you to do now is, present this so you can see it a little bigger. With Jamboard, you get 20 frames, which what we'll look at here in a second. You also can only have up to 50 collaborators. Not sure how many people we have online here. We have 42. Okay, so this is what we'll do between the people in the room and our virtual friends that are joining us. You can either choose board 1 or board 2 because you can only have 50 collaborators on one board. So some of you would join board 2 and some of you join board 1. Just type in this bit.ly and we're just going to take a few minutes and go through the tools together to give you the opportunity to explore Jamboard, and then I'm going to hop in and show you a bunch of templates that you can use. So I'll give everybody a few seconds here to pick a board. And it's all lowercase. Everybody in virtual world, I hope you're doing okay. In virtual world, if you need to pop in and type a question, I have my friend down here that's helping me monitor the chat. So just drop it in the chat window and we'll help you there. All right. So it depends on which board you are. Some of you might be on board 1 and some of you might be on board 2. We're going to go up here and to the top and we're going to go to the next frame. And this is Design Your Doodle. And of course, you can see down there at the bottom, we've got our pens and our colors. So if you go to the next slide, and there's a couple slides here, so we had enough for everyone. Go ahead and take the pens and just make a little doodle in one of the circles. Okay. This is a time also where it's hard for students because I might start in a circle and then Matt might jump in the same circle and we're writing together and we don't want to be.
Denise, we're hearing that it's view only. Is that right? On the second one?
The second one is view only. Okay, I forgot to change it because that's my little trick. So what I'm going to do real quick is jump over here to board 2. People on board 2 do not have access to the tools right now, and that's the little trick. So if I go to share, they are a viewer. I'm going to make them an editor, and I say this is a little trick. So if you're on board 2, go ahead and refresh. If you're working on a Jamboard and you want the students to not have access, you can change it in the middle of your lesson to viewer and they lose those tools. So like if I was going through and I had 5 minutes and the bell was going to ring, we weren't finished for the day and I didn't want the students to work on it at home, all I have to do is change that link from editor to viewer and they lose access to those tools. That's one little trick that we came across. So you guys have been busy here doodling. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. So then the next slide here, you can see in the top hand corner, there's little checks. Unfortunately, you can't make like an infinite cloner. So you can take objects and put on top of one another. And I'm using this as an example. So if you wanted a daily check-in, like do they want a pizza or do they want a hamburger for lunch? If you're showing movies, did they want to watch Polar Express or did they want to watch The Grinch? So what I made for you guys is, are you a person that likes to wrap presents or are you the person that would like to stick it all in a bag and be finished? So what you would do is you would grab your select tool, the arrow here on the left, and just drag your check to which one you are. The last group that I did on Sunday, it was almost a dead split. I had as many liking to wrap gifts as I did sticking to bags. I'm a wrapper myself. My kids just tell me I use way too much tape. Oh, I'm lazy. Somebody's leaving me a little note there. But you can just see how you can use it for a quick check-in. So the next one I have for you is for you to use a Post-it note. So you're going to go over here, you grab a Post-it note, type your name. And then down here, just drag to whatever pet you may have. So I've got a cat, which my children say is possessed and mean. They're ready for me to come home because he's mama's cat and he just meows the whole time I'm gone. He did not see my suitcase before I left, so at least I didn't get, he'll bite my ankle if he sees my suitcase out. He doesn't like it when I leave. So that gives you an idea of how you can use the Post-it notes with your students for making graphs. So you could go in here and you could graph and talk about the data that you're collecting. And then on the next one, we're going to work just real quick with images. So what I want you to do is I want you to think of a piece of technology, a software, a program, a website, something that you like to use. It's your favorite little thing. And then I want you to grab a Post-it note and put your name and the item, and then see if you can find an image that would go with, and put your image and your Post-it note together. Over here to the other board. There we go. If you can't find an image and you just want to take a little screenshot of yourself, you can do that too. Oh, somebody put the B-bots on there. I've been busy Sunday afternoons when my husband's watching football, because we got rid of DirecTV and we run everything through Hulu Live and Sunday NFL Ticket something. But if he's watching his football game and I'm trying to work on my computer, the football game lags. So that doesn't work really well with my husband. So my Sunday afternoons, I've been making B-bot mats. So I'm excited to see the little B-bot up there. All right, so that gives you a little bit of idea of the tools that you can use with Jamboard. I'm going to leave that up so you guys can continue to play and add things as you would like to. I'm going to go back to my presentation. So when you're looking at Jamboard, we do have Google Slides, we have Google Drawings. This is an infographic made by Jen Hall, who's out of Georgia. She's a friend of mine that I met through Discovery Education. Phenomenal website if you're looking for resources. And she does a weekly newsletter that's got all kinds of little tidbits. That's wonderful. And she put this infographic together so you could see which tool would be best for whatever project that you're working on. We went over the tools. I'm gonna, right here on this slide, the dimensions, if you're making your own, you can see it's 16:9 or 1920 by 1080. So if you've not ever changed the dimensions, like if you're doing a Google drawing, you can go down to File, Page Setup, and that's where you can change the dimensions. And that just helps it so that the image is not distorted on your screen. And I don't know how many of you follow Alice Keeler. She's another phenomenal one that's on here, and I've got some of her resources in here. So the link at the bottom gives you the steps on how you can customize your backgrounds. Sharing jams, all you really have to do is copy that link and you can put it in, we're Google Classroom, so that was my example up here, but if you have another LMS, you can also drop that link easily for your students to get to. So this one is one I found, and I'll share them at the end. As far as Facebook, there's 2 or 3 Jamboard teacher groups, and that's where a lot of my templates that I'm going to show you today came from. This one I like. It was the Messy Sped Teacher is what their name is on Facebook. One of the things with Jamboard that I can't stress enough before you turn your students loose is to have a really in-depth conversation on collaboration and respecting people's work. So this person put together these cute little behavior and expectations. And he put it in Jamboard, but he talks about, everyone joining. You're only going to work on the board that's assigned to you. You're not going to delete things that aren't yours. respect everyone's work. He doesn't want them changing their background or clearing things, so they're only going to use the tools, respecting work, and when it's over, it's time to stop editing. And of course, now we can change that from an edit to a viewer so they wouldn't be able to. And then it's a little poster here. So I'm hoping that this particular Jamboard would just guide your discussions with your students as far as collaboration and respecting people's work. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of some of these templates. So the first one that I want to show to you is this MathEDU protocols mindset that's here. The reason that I like this one, it's really hard. And if any of us have ever presented before, when you're trying to present, especially at a conference like this, I'm trying to do K-12 stuff so that everybody can take back something with them. And this site actually gives Jamboards for the elementary, but then also for the middle and the high school. So I can go in here and I'll open up the high school. And any high school math teachers in here? Not math. Yeah, math is not my jam, but I will show this to you all, but don't ask me how to answer any of the problems because I'm not going to be able to do that. Okay, so this is just a numbers thing, and they're telling you here, if you like it, make a copy and make it your own. But it's an example of a higher level or a secondary Jamboard that's not as basic as some of your elementary ones are. But Math Reps has quite a few Jamboards that have already been created. So I like this one, and the reason that I like this one is the teacher actually took her Bitmoji classroom and she saved it as her background. And this is why you can make your own and how it can be beneficial. I will say I was determined not to go down into that Bitmoji classroom hole, but the other coaches that I work with decided we all should have rooms, and 4.5 hours later, I finally came out of the hole. So if you haven't tried it, make sure you got a block of time. But what I like about this is she saved this background to put on here. And then now kids can't move any of these items up here. It's the only way you can lock it into Jamboard. All the students can do is go over here and drag and put their place values in the right spot. On the next one, she had greater than, less than, and equal to. They can't move any of these boxes or any of these numbers. All they can move are the symbols there. Yes, ma'am.
Experience and how Jamboard does work a little bit better than slides for things like this?
It really is a preference for you and your students. I like Jamboard because I feel like it's got a little bit more of collaboration, and kids can put their things on there, and but it really is a preference for you. And I have some teachers that are diehard Google Slides. I will say the one drawback that we have with Jamboard, and I continue to ask Google about this one, is you cannot put any hyperlinks or any videos in. So if you're using hyperlinks and videos, you're still going to want to probably use Google Slides for that. That's the one thing that they have not put into Jamboard yet. But if they put that into Jamboard, I have a couple science teachers that this is, how they'll be able to use in their instruction. Good question. Thank you. And anything else, just raise your hands and shut out, guys.
Your presentation, so we can go back and look at it.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And when you click it, it will make a copy and you'll have it in your drive then. And you can manipulate it and change it however you need to. Number of the day. So I know at the elementary level, they'll focus like the number 12, and then we're going to use base 10 blocks, and we're going to build 12 this way and write it out. So this was just a Jamboard for the numbers of the day. Here's one for multiplication, so you can get into writing and doing the expanded form and the standard form. So this one is task cards. So a lot of times we as teachers have little task cards kids can go and they can work on along with a worksheet. So with this particular Jamboard, the teacher put the task cards into Jamboard and she would share it in a Google Classroom. Each student would make their own copy. And then using their tools, they can come over and they can circle the right answer, and they can go through She then added a worksheet. Rather than giving them another worksheet, they can come here and circle their answer. They could draw out some fractions. So she had the task cards and she had her little fraction unit all here in Jamboard. This is another high school example of math. If you're a secondary teacher and you need some examples there. Equatio, do I have any math teachers? Any math teachers online? Equatio goes along with read and write, which is phenomenal. And with Equatio, what you can do is these little formulas that you have here at the bottom, you can put that in Equatio and copy and paste that and put it into Jamboard. You can put it into Google Docs. You can put it into Google Slides, but it's an easy way to make formulas. So math teachers really like Equatio. So if you're a math teacher and you haven't looked at Equatio, you might want to do that. Here's just an example of how you can use manipulatives. You know, when we were in the virtual world, we couldn't send home, you know, base 10 blocks and money and things for children to manipulate via the computer at home. So here's some base 10 blocks. There's an example with money, so they can just drag those items over to answer your questions. This is actually a video, which we're not going to watch, by Techie Teacher, that goes more into the number lines and some graphic articles, organizers that you can watch later. There we go. I was trying to get through it quickly so the video wouldn't pick up on us. Elementary people in the room? Okay, a couple of you up there. So this is just basically a Jamboard where it's just the alphabet. So if you were having your kids practice their spelling words, they could drag over, or if you're practicing AN and they have to put a letter in front of it, and these are just manipulative letters that they can sit there and build with. Back to the file folder games. How many of us spent hours coloring worksheets, putting them in a file folder, sticking them through the laminator, giving them to Matthew and Tommy over here in the corner to play with for them to say, there's 3 pieces missing. And you're like, really? Well, you can actually go into Jamboard and build some file folder games. So this one is just an example of how they were building words using AT. This one is one that I liked. I found this one recently, and I'm going to open this one up for you. So one of the things, you know, we unfortunately still have to talk about are the SOL tests. What I liked about this particular Jamboard is the teacher took a reading passage and she lumped it on the different frames. So at the top here, she tells her students, in the reading passage, highlight any vocabulary you are not familiar with in red. So when they go to the next frame in their reading, all they have to do is go over here, grab the highlighter, choose red, and they can mark any words that they're unfamiliar with. And then down here at the bottom, she gives them another question. What day and time did the Titanic sail? So they can go over here and here's the information and they can circle it. What I like is we do those test taking strategies for our students as far as highlighting and marking and getting rid of information that we might not need. And by doing the story, she's able to practice, and they have the tools there that are similar to the SOL when you're talking about those test taking strategies. So think about your reading passages where you can put those in here for students to work on. This is the same thing here as the fractions was. This is some task cards. The teacher was talking about adjectives, so the kids went through and they answered questions, and then she had some more activities that she included with it. Another example of a file folder game. So you've got this whole little pile of cards here, and they would drag the cards over to match up the words. So this one is jam-packed of different graphic organizers, K-12 across the board. So for this particular one, this is just, it has all the different parts here for the story. And you'll notice if I click on it, see how this is moving? This was before you could set it as your background. So I would now save this as an image and add it as my background, and students wouldn't be able to move it around. I left this one that way so you guys would see an example of how it looks if you don't set it as a background. But they go through, you have the sandwich here, sense chart. Like I said, there's a lot of different organizers on this one, and I just like it because it can be applied to K-12. It just isn't elementary or just isn't high school. So there's some examples of some organizers there. Character names, so they can draw the little picture of their character in here. And then on the Post-it notes, just write details about their character. This particular one, they have certain things that they have to do for each of the colors. And they use the colors that Jamboard allows for the students to put in their information. Rainbow drawings, how many of you have like the black pieces of paper and you used to sketch and the color would pop through? I don't know how many of you follow Eric Kurtz. He's another one that has quite a few templates. If you're looking for some more information, visit Eric Kurtz. But he has a really cute little demonstration on how you can use rainbow drawings with Jamboard. So I stuck that in there for you. So back in the beginning, when I was showing you the backgrounds, when Jamboard originally started, it only had one lined background, and the lines are very, very teeny tiny and put together. And at that point, Alice Keeler is like, that won't work for us. So she actually created some lined paper that you can use as background. So this is your regular paper, the storybook paper, your dotted line, and then your dotted line with color. So if you're thinking about your children in K and 1, in my particular building, my K and 1 students have touch screens. So if your students had touch screens, you could put this on your Jamboard and they could use their stylus and work on their handwriting or writing their words or whatever you would be asking them to do.
Denise, the question for the chat was, can Jamboards be used if students don't have a Google account?
You have to have a Google account to get into Jamboard, just like you would with Docs or Slides. Good question, thank you. So when we get into some games here, this particular one has a bunch of different formats, but you can see how it's a little distorted. And that's because they didn't set up those dimensions before they added it as a background. So Alice Keeler also created a bingo board, so you could put the bingo board in, and either you or your students could go in and put the words or the numbers or whatever you would be working on instructionally and playing the bingo game. So the template for that is there. Here's a Connect 4 one. So, you know, as we look towards winter and the possibility of, you know, it being cold and you might have to have indoor recess, you can set some games up on Jamboard for your students to play. Would you rather? I've had to sub in 4th and 5th grade classrooms last year and this year, and the kids like eat up this would you rather stuff. Like if I walk in the room, it's either book it or would you rather. That's the two things that they always want to play. So there's actually some Jamboards and they've already been created. All you have to do is show the students and they can choose which one they would rather do. So here's a calendar that we used when we were in the virtual world, and we wanted to do calendar with our elementary students because we knew we needed those tally mark skills and filling in the days of the week and trying to keep everything on task like we would if we were in a regular classroom. So this is a virtual calendar that you can put into Jamboard. How many of your students are into coding, or you've done some coding with your students? So this particular Jamboard is set up to code. So it's going to follow the little snowman. So I'll go to the next one. So what students would do is they have to move their little snowman here. This is the start button. And then of course they have to come over here and decide how he's going to get down to his little presents that are down here so that they can code it through to get down to the present. And then there's some empty game boards here that you can add your own information onto. But if you're working in coding, we use for unplugged activities, we've used the mat. So now you can put it into Jamboard. Brain dumps. So if you're trying to get some information either prior knowledge of your students or post knowledge, post assessment to see what they've learned. This one is just an example of a brain dump. It's the Greek gods. It says dump everything you know. They could add a sticky note or draw or put an image in. So it's what do you remember about the Greek god Eris? And it doesn't have to be a Greek god. You can put in there, what do you remember about the life cycle of a butterfly? What do you remember about Native American Indians? What do you remember about Rosa Parks? So you could get information of what they've learned, or you could be saying, what do you know before you do a unit of study? So this one just went through and just asked the kids, what do you remember or what do you know? And they were able to put their information in it. And then you could take that information and guide your instruction with it. There's a lot of different check-ins that you could use. This one says, okay, good, bad. Some of them do, you know, on a scale 1 to 5, and there's little fingers and they can decide where they fit in the scale. So down here at the bottom, the teacher would have put their name on a Post-it and they could drag it up here. If you wanted to keep it more private, I know with my littles, we give them, you're always number 1, you're number 2, or you're number 3. You could assign them a number and only you and the student would know what number they are, so that you could do some check-ins with your students. So I liked this one, and I like it for a couple of reasons, and I have another one, an all about me one. How many times do we do an autobiography or a biography and we send home this big piece of poster board on the paper or on the bus? Sometimes it comes back, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it comes back in 2 pieces, or students don't have access to poster board. Jamboard's a way that they can create it digitally and you don't have to worry about all of that. So this particular one is Love Yourself, so they can use the camera and they can put the picture of themselves in there, and then they can add what's special about them, what they like or what they're good at. And that can be a nice little opening when you start school and everyone's getting to know each other. Each student would just have their own frame to put their information on. So I was a little disappointed. I tried this one with some students that are in middle school, and I guess we all grew up with Mad Libs and loved to do Mad Libs. But we struggled a little bit with this activity. I told them we were going to come back to it. But this is a Christmas Mad Lib. So you would go through. It talks about the different types of speeches, so you can go over that and they can go back and refer to it. And then there's a little bit more instructions here, and they're going to work in pairs of 2. And then they're going to fill in the story with the different types of speech for the Mad Libs. But they wanted to read the story and just add what they thought was going to be in there. Not necessarily wasn't an adjective or a noun or a verb. So we had to go back and tweak it a little bit. But we always enjoyed Mad Libs as students. So I liked that they were able to throw that into a Jamboard. So 4 corners, I don't know how many of you have used 4 corners in your classroom before. We had to get a little creative last year when we couldn't be in each other's spaces. So with Jamboard, you could create 4 corners and students could take a Post-it note and they could put where they were in the 4 corners digitally so that they weren't in each other's spaces. A question of the day, you can just post the question and then they can respond to it. Factor opinions. The stoplight, I like this one as a reflection of their day. Today, my learning was stopped because, or I considered a question, an idea, or a new perspective, or today I learned, and then they can put things into the stoplight and share that with you so you know how they're feeling about their learning. Holly Clark, who has written a couple different books, has a link here. How many of you have stuck your toe into Wakelet for a little bit? So anybody that hasn't heard of Wakelet? Okay, Wakelet is a website where you can put all of your resources. I dabble with it a little bit, but basically I can go down through here and she has a whole big collection of just different Jamboards. So I've shared this Wakelet with you in the presentation. So here's some Jamboard templates. You can see here she used the little Bitmojis, which kids love. I don't know how many of you use the instructional strategy for glows and grows, but there's a Jamboard for that one. She's created a memory game here. Here's another example of morning calendar. So just a lot of good Jamboards. She pulled in the math reps also on hers. 6-word story is another instructional strategy. On this particular one, they've taken the cell and the students would label the cell. Or if you were studying the layers of the earth, you could put that on there and the students could label it. Any type of life cycle, you could have the students label it. Here's the calendar, another morning meeting, some check-ins. So like I said, she's got a full whole list here. And I share this with you because number one, if it's here, I don't want you to have to reinvent the wheel. And number two, if you like part of a Jamboard, you can always tweak it and make it your own and use what you need out of it. So that was Holly Clark. So here was the example of the All About Me when I said when the students were doing their posters. There's another example for you to look at. Matt Miller, anybody follow Matt Miller or been on Matt Miller's website? So he has created, he's got one of his blog articles on there. It's 10 different templates for Jamboards, two truths and a lie or a fib, a graffiti wall. He has his own 4 corners. So here's some other Jamboards that you can check out. I mentioned Jen Hall at the beginning. She also has created other Jamboards. It's on her page that you can look at. Hers go along with, if your school is, oops, sorry, let me go back here. If your school is a discovery education school, any discovery education subscribers in the room? So in discovery education, you have the spotlight on strategies. And they're just instructional strategies that you can use in your classroom. And that's what she sort of made her Jamboards through. So I mentioned Facebook. If you're on Facebook, Patty does a phenomenal job of putting in new Jamboards. That's where I get a lot of hers from. In the world of TikTok, there is a whole section of Jamboards on TikTok. I was really surprised. I looked at my daughter. I'm like, look, there is something educational on here that's good. I only dabble with TikTok just a little bit, but you can look on TikTok for some other examples of Jamboard. This is my credits page where I was able to get everything. It's a lot of resources, and what I'm hoping you can take away from this is one, that your head is beginning to have some ideas of how you can use Jamboard in your classroom. You've got templates here that you can build Jamboards from. So I want you to be able to do that for your classroom, but I can't stress enough to you, when you begin the process of Jamboard in your classroom, make sure you set up those expectations from the very beginning with your students. Because if you set up those expectations, it's going to help you in the long run with Jamboard. My information is on the first slide. I'm just going to do a real quick shout out at the bottom for Unison EDU. We had a table out near the registration area. Patrick Hauserman is our brave leader with Unison. It was his Google Innovator project. We are a nonprofit group of educators that come together and supply PD for schools for little or no cost. So if your school is interested or needs something and you're like, we don't know anything about Jamboard, if you contact Unison, we can set up PD to come to your buildings and do some PDs for you. We also have a blog. We've done some webinars, and we actually were able to do our first virtual conference back in October. So we're excited for the things that are coming through with Unison, but I do want to give them a shout out real quick while we have everybody here online and in the room. So I'm going to open up the floor for questions, comments. Everybody still seems to be awake, so try to open up the chat here, but I'm sure everything is going.
I have a question. With your teachers, would you say they use it more as a collaboration where like each child has a slide, or more where each child has their own and they work it through it? Does that make sense?
Most of my teachers have their own frame to work on, and then so that the whole project is together. It's one Jamboard, yeah.
But you can only do up to 20.
You can put 20, yeah. So that's like today I had to have the 2. So it might be, okay, the boys are on board 1 and the girls are on board 2, or if you've got grouping in your classroom, you could divide it up that way. But most of us have used it, each child would get assigned to one.
But you can also, so like I'm thinking like a secondary application, you can also have each student have their own.
Yes, absolutely, like the task cards, like you would make a copy of that and each student would work off of it. So it just depends on what you're looking at as far as what you want the outcome to be in your instruction. And like I said, that one trick like of turning them from viewer to editor comes in pretty handy. Are we okay on online? Well, if everybody is, I finished early, I apologize. I probably talked too fast, so I apologize to that, but I'll stick around. And if you have questions or if you use Jamboard in a way in your classroom and you want to share it with me, that would be awesome also. And like I said before, if you get back to your schools and you don't remember where the resources are, it's actually hooked in Sketch. So here's the one for Jamboard, but I also did periodic table of extensions on Sunday. So that's also on my resource page. So. Okay. Thank you guys, and enjoy getting your brains filled before it's time to go home, and be safe going home this evening. This was my timer that said my time was getting close. So